Hello everyone. In this episode we cover about US debt and de-dollarization. Which one is a real challenge for America, US? The United States today carries more than $37 trillion in federal debt, a figure that sounds alarming. Economists debate deficits, Congress argues about spending cuts, and headlines warn of fiscal cliffs. Yet the number that may matter even more isn't on the Treasury's balance sheet at all. It's the shrinking global share of trade and reserves conducted in US dollars. Debt can be managed. Loss of dollar dominance changes the foundation on which America's entire financial system rests. Why debt is still contained? Roughly 80% of US debt is domestic, owned to American pension funds, banks, mutual funds, and Federal Reserve itself. Interest payments largely circulate within the country, and the government can refinance its own currency. As long as investors at home and abroad trust the dollar, that debt is sustainable. Japan, for instance, carries a far higher debt to GDP ratio, yet faces little crisis because investors trust the yen. Debt becomes dangerous only when confidence erodes. Until then, it is fiscal management issue, not an existential threat. What de-dollarization means? De-dollarization is the process by which countries conduct more trade and hold more reserves in non-dollar currencies such as euro, yuan, or local tender. The trend accelerated after Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022 when Western nations froze Russia's dollar reserves. The act, lawful within the sanctioning nations, nonetheless convinced many governments that dollar holdings could be politically vulnerable. Since then, BRICS countries and several Eastern and African nations have increased trade in their own currencies, while central banks worldwide have expanded gold and yuan holdings. The dollar's share of global reserves has quietly fallen from about 72% 2 decades ago to nearly 58% today. Why losing dollar dominance is harder to fix? Debt is internal, de-dollarization is external. If the world reduces its demand for dollars, US borrowing costs rise as fewer for foreigners buy treasuries. The dollar weakens, making imports and energy more expensive. Inflation pressures mount at home. Sanctions and global influence lose power. The US can restructure debt, raise taxes, or adjust spendings, but it cannot compel other nations to keep using its currency. That is why de dollarization represents a strategic, not merely financial challenge. How the two problems interact. Ironically, America's ability to sustain debt depends on dollar dominance. Global demand for the dollar keeps treasury yields low, allowing US to borrow cheaply. If de dollarization progresses, interest rates must rise to attract buyers, making same debt suddenly heavier. Thus, the two issues are connected. Weaker dollar, higher borrowing costs, worsening debt burden. The way forward. To preserve dollar confidence, the US should demonstrate fiscal discipline so markets trust its long term solvency. Reaffirm financial neutrality. The dollar must feel safe even for countries with differing politics. Invest in real productive assets, infrastructure, technology, energy dependence, so the currency reflects tangible strength. Lead through cooperation with developing economies rather than confrontation. Integration keeps them inside the dollar system. Debt is a symptom. De-dollarization is the disease that could make it fatal. A nation can live with debt if its currency remains the world's reserve. But if confidence in the dollar erodes, even manageable debt becomes a burden the economy can no longer carry it lightly. America's greatest financial weapon is not its printing press, it is the world's trust. Protecting that trust is the real challenge of the century.